Agile Meridians, Agile Shorts. What we're going to do, and we're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to go through and we're going to spend the next 9-10 sessions talking about disruption and innovation. Not only disruption from the company standpoint or the business standpoint, but as the personal as well. And it's important that we talk about that, right? Because in our, there's been a lot of conversations over the last couple months about chat GPT, right? And how it's going to change the world and it's going to be dynamic. It's going to change the way we do theses, when we're doing our college papers and those kind of things. So, but, everybody acts like that's brand new. But change has been happening going all the way back from the time of the wheel, right? The wheel was one of the first probably, or fire, right? It's one of those innovations that people kind of happen and then people go, okay, now how can we use this? So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to spend the next 9-10 sessions talking about that. So with that, let's go ahead and Mike, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So today's session, we're going to talk about change in people. We've taken some excerpts out of a session that we do, a work session that we do with folks called "Let's Move Some Cheese." Right. So it's actually a really fun way. It's a fun session to talk about change in humans and how humans react differently, even to the same change, and how different changes happen. And we've broken it down into 3 parts. We talk about why people resist change, which is, it's important to know the basics behind it. Talk about seeing the signs. How do you recognize when someone is okay with change, they're dealing well with it, or where they're struggling? And then the last thing is like, what are some tips? It's not an extensive, all-inclusive situation, but what are some ways that you could help some folks to lower the anxiety and help them mitigate and work through change and maybe even excel through change and become better at dealing with change? So we're going to talk about that really light, condensed version, and I want to poll our partners here and talk about that as we go through. But we're first going to talk about why people resist change. So let's go ahead and discuss some of those reasons why. So actually, I don't know if I'm sure some of you here recognize the item there on the left-hand side. I lovingly had one of these when I was in my younger professional career as well.
I had one too.
Oh, you had one? I say, how many of you guys had one of these, right? The little BlackBerry, right? Exactly. Yeah. So it was
that was the coveted device to have back in the day.
If you were in business, it was what you wanted, right? You were on the cutting edge if you had one of these, right?
And the more buttons, the better.
Yeah, and it was great. It was like a real keyboard on a phone and screen. Everything was fantastic. But we use this kind of as an example to go through. And let's talk about some of the reasons that people actually resist change. So go ahead and we'll move this forward. So familiarity is one of the things, right? And you can go ahead and list all of these out. You can put them down if you want, Kumar, there. So familiarity is a key element. People like to stay with what they're familiar with, right? They're comfortable. They've gotten proficient at it. It's nice and easy. I'm a person who loves familiarity because I love simplicity. And I love predictability, and familiarity has both of those elements in it, right? We look at the cost, the time, the money, the effort to make a change that it takes to institute a change. Some people resist change from planning it because they don't want to incur all that. Other people in doing it because they don't want to incur these things. The anxiety and the stress from change. Those are things, again, the difference. You have to go through, learn something new. There's a lot of unknowns, all these different things you have to deal with. There's psychological safety comes into play with this. There's a lot of psychological safety in something, and when there's newness happening or different things happening, that psychological safety gets disrupted. It gets changed. It gets moved. It may be in jeopardy, or it may not be there at all when you move through change, depending on how severe the changes are. The give up versus gain. This is something that's wired into our brains as humans, where we think about what is it that we're giving up when we're losing this versus the gain. And that's why the BlackBerry's here. When you think about the BlackBerry, what partners, what do you think? What was one of the main reasons why people would hang on to a BlackBerry? When iPhone came out, when other phones came out, and all this other stuff. Why is it that, and people are still using them today? Believe it or not, they're still using them today. Why would they want
I think it's what you said. You know, the number one thing, familiarity, is that they're familiar with the buttons. They like the buttons. They like the tactile nature of using a button, and can't figure out how to use this flat, one-dimensional screen to type anything.
Yeah, the platform, the form factor of it, it's kind of a little bigger, right? So you can hold it in your hands. You can type with your thumbs. It was really fast. The tactile nature of the keyboard itself, huge reason why some of the people still stay with it.
Just perfect example is my mom. You know, she recently, we got her one of those Apple Watches, and it's because she's older, and you know, the Apple Watch has some nice features for folks that might fall or get into an accident or something, and it alerts people automatically. And she resisted for so long, you know, because I think it's not familiar with a device like that. The cost really wasn't an issue because she wasn't buying it; we were. But then the stress of having to learn something new with a little screen, how will I use it? And certainly, you know, a lack of psychological safety with these devices. I might break it, you know, I might not know how to use it. So
yeah,
I can see a lot of
devices. Yeah, those Apple devices are really elegant, right? There's no buttons. It's very smooth. It's kind of sleek and modern looking. But in the same way, that can be very intimidating because what do? There's no intuitive way to work with this. I kind of have to learn how to work with it. So yeah, and it's funny because the iPhone does a whole lot more than the BlackBerry does, right? A lot more. But just that one feature may actually, because that's what they use it for. That's what they're thinking about, what they're losing, not what they're gaining with that new device, right? All the other things they could do.
It is good to point out that cultural aspect too, right? Because everyone in the company would have a BlackBerry, and it was more.
It was a status symbol too, to be seen with your Rolex, right?
It was more cool to have one because you made it to the place where you handed down a BlackBerry from your company, and not everyone had it. Maybe just the senior people had it, and it was a cultural thing of being cool. And it's a.
Yeah, absolutely. And then history. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mike. From a corporate standpoint, right, there was a lot of resistance against the iPhone when it came out, for example, by the security folks at organizations. They said, "Oh, this iPhone, it's not secure, right? It's not going to keep our data. We can't necessarily." One of the nice things about the BlackBerry was you could wipe it out, right? I mean, they could wipe it out from, you know, corporate headquarters. I know I had one that I left in a cab in Thailand, and they were able to zap, you know, as soon as I figured it out, I called back home and they were able to wipe it out, right? And those corporate folks didn't want to have to worry about multiple devices. It's only when people, you know, when people started moving forward personally and buying those and having both the BlackBerry and the iPhone, that really those corporate folks started opening that up from a security standpoint.
Well, that's
BYOD.
Yeah, that's interesting. You think about the marketing of the two products, right? BlackBerry was marketed to the business person, to companies, it was a business tool that you used. And the iPhone necessarily wasn't marketed that way, but people wanted it when they figured out all those things they could do. They wanted to use it in their business. I remember that big conflict they had with people wanting to bring their own, it's a BYOD movement, right? Bringing your own device in and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of this. And then there's history, right? There's history around these things. You have a history with the product or service. You have history that ties tightly into the culture aspect. So these are some of the reasons why people resist change, right? So let's move forward a little bit. There's one other slide I want to show on this, and go ahead and you can put the other bubbles up. So we talk about this a lot. The four of us use this a whole lot with a lot of people. This idea
even with ourselves.
Oh yeah, even with ourselves. We actually were talking about
we run the gamut. We run the sort of the spectrum here, the four of us. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, we were talking about this last week. For folks on the session today, we were all together in Miami last week, and it was great. We had some great time together. We talked a little. We even referred to this a little bit. Like some of us are in different places with different types of change, right? Because we're different personalities, different personas. But the same change, for example, let's take that BlackBerry. There are different people. There are different personas. Involving now Roger's innovation adoption curve is really about products being introduced, about new products being introduced to the marketplace. But we use it a lot in our space because it also has to do with adopting change. It's really around anything with change. And then we put the 5 social business personas. They fit right over top, which is a really nice way to put this together. You look at any organization, any body of groups of people, and you're going to have some kind of a bell curve distribution around these types of percentages. People argue the percentages, but they're pretty close to the averages around the way people think about change. If you want to think about it in a broader term, we'll use that. We'll use the iPhone, for example. You think about the innovators, those that 2.5%, they join when it's new. Those are the folks camping out in front of the store. They're sitting there 2 days beforehand in the snow in the middle of Seattle, waiting for this to happen, right? And they have their phone works fine. There's nothing wrong with their phone, but they want it because it's coming. In fact, they might even want it, not even knowing all the things. They probably know everything about it. They're so into the new stuff, right? You got the second group, those early adopters. And those are folks that they join when they perceive it's a benefit, right? So a lot of times it could be the people like, hey, maybe it's not camping out the day before, but when they look at it and say, you know what, in a couple of weeks, when all this stuff's kind of worked its way out and the frenzy's over and stuff, they've worked out the bugs on the new operating system, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get this, right? They don't necessarily think their phone is still working. But they see it. They see a value or benefit. When you start getting into early majority and late majority, what you're seeing is a larger part of the population, right? You're looking at nearly 70% of an organization in this middle. They're going to have more needs as you move from the left side of the curve to the right. There's more needs that need to be met for the individuals in those groups in order for them to move towards the change, to move towards the new thing, right? So in the case of the iPhone, join when there's real productivity gains. Hey, when I've looked at all the features, is there enough new features in this thing that I can actually sundown my phone? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It could also be that, hey, my phone's not working that well anymore. I'll do the upgrade. That's a real productivity gain because my old phone's not working well anymore. So something like that. You look at like the late majority, those folks are going to say, hey, I want to make sure the warranty's there. I want to make sure these other things, I got protection. I want to make sure there's a lot of help around this thing because when the new features come out, I want to be able to have a nice help system that helps me get supported. And then the folks in the last category, that Rogers Curve calls it laggards. These are really the folks that like the BlackBerry. I'm sticking with the BlackBerry. I like my BlackBerry. I don't need a new phone. It doesn't have buttons, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing that you're going to do that convinces me until you shut the BlackBerry down for me to move off the BlackBerry, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of the different needs of a population, even around one change that can change the way that they act, react, and interact with that change itself and with each other. We see that in organizations all the time. And this really relates back heavily to the concept of disruption. And the next 2 sessions, we're going to talk about personal disruption. But it really relates back to that very, very much in a core sense, because this is going to change. You're going to look at a population in a group. They're going to change and move towards disruptive activities in different ways. And it's a completely natural thing that happens in any organization of any size. Any thoughts on this, guys, before we move to the next part?
I do. I have a story about laggards. So real quick, to get, Mike said there's nothing you can do around to get somebody to move from a BlackBerry to an iPhone, right? And that was the example he gave. My example of a laggard is my father, much like Kumar, right? My dad just about a year ago got a new smartphone. He had a flip phone, the old style flip phone that came out in 2004.
I love those because they lasted a whole week.
A whole week. Well, he still had one of those. And I was trying to convince him to move into the, smartphone phase. And I said, you can put all your contacts in there. And then you don't have to worry about remember numbers and whatever. And he goes, my dad's a diesel mechanic, kind of a burly guy. And he goes, by God, I don't have to worry about the contacts. He reaches out, pulls his wallet, opens up this laminated sheet that Mom had made him that had everybody's names and phone numbers. This is my contact list. And he finally moved, right? He finally got it. It took us 10 years to get him there. But, those are the kind of people that they just, to reinforce what Mike was saying, they just don't see the value of moving, right? They've got it. They're comfortable. I don't get it. I don't think it's worth me spending the money to go do that, right?
Yep.
I just want to add on one more thing. I mean, it is entirely possible. In the course of life, people move from right to left, because I'm a very good example of that. I'm guessing that people will move from left to right of this Rogers curve as well. But more often than not, people move from right to left. I had a very risk-averse childhood, so to speak, upbringing, and as I got older, which might be very atypical, as I grew older, I have kind of moved towards the left in many ways. I'm still not maybe an innovator or an early adopter, but I'm definitely an early majority at this point, and an early adopter in some cases, right? Not always. Maybe in terms of like phones or something like that, I might be an early adopter. But if I have to buy a new car, I'm probably an early majority. I want the technology to be proved out before I buy one. So people move along the spectrum is what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I also think
last week in Miami, we actually had a good example of this. It came up in conversation on that solar powered car, the Aptera.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm in line. I'm buying it as soon as it comes out.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, maybe not as soon as it comes out. Once it goes in production, then I know that it's viable.
You want an order in before it's even out, right?
Yeah, right. So I'm like in that innovator, like just on the line between innovator and early adopter, and you guys are somewhere to the right of that. I don't know how far. I don't think any of you are laggards. I think you're all sort of, hey, this sounds good. It might work, maybe.
Yeah.
But it was interesting how we all fell on this curve.
Well, yeah. And you will fall into different spots. You could fall into different spots on different subjects, right?
That's right.
If it's something, if it was skydiving on me, I'd be a laggard. Absolutely. Because I'm afraid of heights. But if it has to do with something that makes my life simpler, I'm an innovator. I'm way to the left because I love simplicity, right? It's my nirvana. So it really, context matters around this. And people aren't a persona on everything the same way. It's contextually, they will be in different spots on this. And part of what we're going to talk about next is how do you recognize that people are challenged with that? And then we're going to go through that really quickly. And then I want to talk briefly, while we still have some time, around how do you help someone make those movements forward. So seeing the signs, this is where you're going to say, oops, let's go back.
Sorry, I went too far.
That's okay. That's the animation in the PowerPoints, right? So seeing the signs. So again, how well are they participating? Do you see them engaging? Do you see them actively engaging, or are they begrudgingly engaging? Yeah, they're being drug into this, right? How transparent are they? Are they talking? Are they interacting? Are they engaged? Are they speaking about things? Are they being transparent about that? Or are they kind of holed up, shelled up? Body language has a lot to do with this. Voice inflection has a lot to do with this. It's kind of the messaging that they're giving you around this, right? How engaged are they in the works by themselves, or are they being asked or kind of voluntold to engage into this, right? How inquisitive are they? Are they asking a lot of questions? Do they seem excited? Are they using yeah, but versus yes and, right? Is it kind of like they have a lot of concerns, or they have a lot of reasons for not doing something, or there's a lot of, they're devil's advocating a lot, right? In these things, if you see that constantly with no balance on the other side, they may be a little farther to the right. We're different because we hear this all the time as coaches. Yeah, that might work in the IT industry, but over here in manufacturing, or over here in healthcare, or whatever we do, right? There's always some uniqueness. Well, context and situationally, yes, that's true. But however, over the long term, you can talk about that. Failure worry. This is a cultural thing, a historical thing. This can prevent you from moving from right to left. If you have, in a culture, you're worried about what happens if you fail, if the consequences from that are severe, or you perceive them to be severe, that will prevent you from moving from left to right. From right to left. It will keep you on the right-hand side. And you will be a late majority for most things, because they have a lot of fears around if things don't go well. That's part of what that majority deals with in a certain subject matter. an all or nothing. Hey, if we can't go all the way in, this is the idea of not being incremental or iterative in your thinking, right? Iterative improvement. If you're thinking that way, they're kind of bought in, they're moving forward. If they're kind of resisting it, then there's signs there that they're probably not ready for this. And you see the graph here, it says the chasm. It's the innovators and the early adopters that are kind of driving things. It's nearly 20%, somewhere between 15 and 20% of an org. Once you get that sustainable mass, things start moving. But it's the people on the other side, the right side of that, they're the ones that have a hard time. They're going to move towards you if they get those fears and these things met. And then we talked about the 5 social business personas. So those come into play as well. But I want to move to the last slide here real quick because we're getting late on time, obviously. But I want to talk about how do you help some people through this, right? These are really kind of some good patterns. And if you do them kind of in order, it's very helpful because it's going to help you move someone from the right over to the left quicker, right? Even if they exist there now, it's going to help their transition go faster. So emptying some of the glass, we call it emptying the glass when you go in. If your glass is full of stuff, if you've got all this history and these bad feelings and these bad experiences, and we're trying to pour something new in there, you're trying to help someone learn something new, it's just going to go over the side. It's not going to stick. It's not going to stay. So you need to give them some time to empty the glass, get out some of that stuff, kind of get it out of their system. So there's room in their glass to take something in new. There's a lot of benefits from this. It helps to build psychological safety and trust, but there's a whole lot. Obviously, we go into this in more depth when we're working with someone, but it's definitely a good thing.
We actually have a video on this that we did specifically on emptying your glass.
Oh, that's true. We had one that we did. That's right. We can go back. It's in our YouTube channel. Right? Yeah, exactly. So generating some ahas for yourself first, as a person who's helping facilitate someone kind of moving across that spectrum, definitely spend some time to make sure you get some ahas and understand what's really going on. You're not going to be able to help somebody get somewhere if you're not involved or kind of in their shoes, if you know where they're coming from. So get some ahas for yourself as a facilitator to help somebody make that movement a lot more seamlessly. Definitely building psychological safety. As you do all of these things that are listed here, you're going to start to build that psychological safety with that person every single time you make a step or you make a progress move towards this. You definitely want to do some lean startup approaches, some lean thinking. I know we've done some other videos around that as well with lean startup and some lean thinking elements. You want to leverage their strengths. That's part of getting ahas for yourself is understand what are their strengths. What are they good at right now? Get them some early wins, make them feel good, get those strengths involved in moving, and it will help them make those transitions a lot easier. You want small wins early. You want to iterate. You want to get small little wins and get them feeling good about what's going on. Start reducing the fear of all the different things that they're worried about. If there's failure worry, if there's all or nothing thinking, right? This will help you with those two elements. Now you can start generating ahas for them. Now they've been through enough of the experience with you and there's enough trust and psychological safety. They'll start getting some ahas themselves. And then you start to create from a push to a pull. Now you're starting to move into a pull system where now they're starting to pull themselves along. The whole time you want to make sure you're building ownership in this. Have them involved in it. Don't do it to them, do it with them, and have them come up and generate a lot of their own path and their own direction on this. Be the guardrails, be the guide, be the Sherpa, but allow them to help create some ownership as they move through this. It will get you a long way. So any thoughts on this, guys, as we start to kind of wind down this session?
One of the things that I have seen is to build that psychological safety, especially in entrenched organizations where failure is not an option, right? Yes. I mean, failure is looked at as a bad thing, which leaves little room for experimentation or trying small things to get the rest of these things going. And that if we get past that, and if we can work with the leadership and senior people to get past that psychological safety hurdle or barrier, that would be an immense achievement for the company.
I think the first bullet there, right, emptying some of the glass, I think that can go a little ways towards generating some psychological safety. Just the conversations that you have with your, for yourself and with your team to get people to empty, make some space for conversation, discussion, collaboration. should help, I would think. And then of course you follow that up.
Yeah, that's this part that gets skipped the most often that I've seen. That people, in fact, some people have never really been educated on the value of it and don't even understand it's a thing, right? To do it. There's
Yeah.
actual tactical things, exercises, things you can do with someone that will help them empty the glass. And I think it's part that gets skipped over too many times. And people wonder and say, well, I did everything I should do. Why aren't they getting it? Why isn't it resonating? It's like, there's no space, man. They're still in crazy mind. You got to get them opened up a little bit. So
Yeah. Good stuff.
sure.
Oh, missed one. Lead from the sides, guardrails.
We actually talked about it a little bit, right? That idea of if you're going to help build ownership, if you're leading from the side, if you're the guardrails, maybe you're Sherpaing a little bit at the beginning, but you should be doing less of it and then handing that over to them as they go, ensuring that they don't go off the cliff as they're moving.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Start to accelerate. That's a really good thing as well. So.
This is also seems like it's a very much a coaching approach that any leader should take when they're leading a change effort.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's not about sort of charging headlong to or head first to some change that needs to be implemented. It's about the people anyway. It's about the humans. Make them first, and going through these steps will make that change more sticky. Last longer, just based on that last slide that you showed, right? So getting people to move to the left takes time, right? And you need a strong sort of a core of people that have that buy into this, that can own this, that own the change, and then influence others along the way.
It's absolutely perfect, Kumar, because the humans are the most complex part of any change, of any movement, if you're making it. And it's the one that people spend the least amount of time on. At the same time. And that's the crazy. You see it in mergers and acquisitions. You see it in divisional changes. You see it when there's new innovations or disruption in a market space because a new competitor disrupted it or something like that. People aren't paying attention to the people as much as they should, because it's the one that's going to be the hardest and longest and most effort-driven thing to do to make the change happen well and to make it sustainable. So I think you're right about that. So in speaking of disruption and personal disruption, it kind of starts with the people, but it starts with the individuals. And I would definitely say you're right in terms of any corporate or leadership. You've got to bake these things in both at a strategic level, and then there's tactical things you do for each one of them. But it all starts with personal disruption, right? It all starts there. And Kumar, talk a little bit about that and kind of where we're going with our next two sessions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the overview you provided, Mike, on change, the broad change and how it impacts people sets us up for a really good next couple of sessions on what it means to change as an individual. We're all going through a lot of change, have been for a long time, and the change is only accelerating, right? Tools like GPT and other things are going to come along that's going to make, or it might seem that it would make our jobs maybe less useful or less valuable, in some cases make our jobs obsolete, right? And so this idea and notion of personal disruption might seem like a negative word, but we're using it as more of the positive side of it. That disruption, like Chat GPT or whatever comes down the pike, can lead to innovation at a personal level, can lead to growth at a personal level. So we're going to focus the next two sessions on how you as an individual can thrive in a time of change.
Absolutely. That's great. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I'm good.
I don't have any. This was a really good intro. We could spend a lot more time on just change itself, but we have 10 sessions that we're going to be diving into the details of change and how it impacts people, teams, and organizations. So hopefully you'll join all 10 of these live, or at least be able to see them at some point.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And thank you, partners, for having this conversation. Look forward to the following weeks.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.